Alright, what's up guys? So, in this tutorial I'd like to talk about DD, okay? And DD's got a bad name. Something so feared that somebody, should never ever use it. Well, that's a lie, okay? DD deserves its respect, no doubt, but it shouldn't be so scary that nobody wants to ever use it. Today I'm going to show you how to clone your hard drive with it, okay? Now DD is good for, it actually stands for disk duplicator, alright, but there's been some nicknames given to it like disk destroyer and disk death and stuff like that, right? And it can be if you get a little loose on it, alright? But it is great. It copies byte for byte, block for block, everything over, okay? It can be used for many things. You can copy CDs over, you can copy movies over, you can copy whatever it is. Anything that has a byte or a block in it, you can copy it over. Alright? But a lot of people stay away from it because of its power. And it's not really that scary. So, first thing I want to do is, I'm going to start up screen here. I have a hard drive that I want to clone over. And I just thought this would be a good idea to kind of put this video up. We'll say something like, I'm going to connect to, I have a Pentium 3 machine that I SSH into. So that's all this is here, this little connect thing, quick connect thing. It's just a quick script of, it just does SSH. And we'll say my password. Okay, so now I'm in my machine. Now, first thing to do is we'll say fdisk-l, and this is my LFS 6.2 machine, okay? And this is actually my, when I actually first got done the install. So it's LFS with the tools directory, sources directory, everything else like that, just bare LFS, nothing on it. And I had already cloned it over a long time ago, and I cloned it over to here, but I put, I started building on it and put a web server, not a web server, SSH server, web browsers, all kinds of other different programs and tools that I need to go ahead and use. Okay, so if you wanted to think of it as, of course, I don't really want to operate on this drive here because if I ever screw it up, well, I'd have to start from zero, and that's just not a good idea. Okay, so I clone that over to here so that if I ever bugged out here and had a bad problem, the worst thing that would happen to me is I could drop back down and I have to reinstall all my stuff again over top of here, but I didn't have to rebuild the operating system, right? So I just like to clone over this drive here for testing out stuff and playing with everything, and if that fails I can always bail out and come back to where I was stable at. Okay, so I'm going to clone HDA3, I'm going to clone that over, and I'm going to put it in my 60 gig drive here. Okay, so the first thing you have to do with DD is you have to check and make sure. I'm using screen, so I can say Control A, okay, Control A, Shift S, Control H will tab, Control H will C. I can first thing you have to do is get an approximation on how big your partition is going to have to be. Okay, now I know it's about 7 gigs or something like that, right? But you kind of want to approximate, because you don't really want to clone over, say, a 7 gig partition to a 20 gig partition. It's not really resizing it. Okay, you just moved it over, and then you'll have, say, 14, 13 gigs of loss that you might not be able to use. Okay, unless you resize or do something else like that, but that's not efficient. So I'm going to take this number here, 68. I'm going to use basic calculator. Everybody's got basic calculator except for LFS. You have to install it. But you want to say 68, 36, I'm going to say 256. Okay, I'm going to divide that by 1 gig. Okay, so what I end up with is something like 6.676 gigs. Okay, so I can make my approximation to say that if I went 7 gigs with it, I should be about close, not have too much loss. Okay, I have about 24 gigs of or megabytes of loss. All right, but I can get a lot closer than that if I just specify the block count. Okay, but sometimes block count's just a pain in the butt, and if you can afford a couple megs here or there, then that's okay. All right, so let me say quit that, and now, like I said, I'm going to simulate this because DD takes a while. So for something like 7 gigs for me, that takes about 2 hours to clone over. So I want to make a smaller partition, very small, just so you can see the syntax and how DD is actually working. Okay, but let's say that our drive here, we'll say fdisk. First you have to create a partition, so I'm going to say fdisk HDD. That's where I want my clone to go to. I'm going to say P for print, and I'm going to say new primary, and I could say 1. Okay, and then you would say plus 7 gigs. Okay, or you could say plus however big your drive is. But for this tutorial, I'm not going to go 7 gigs. I'm only going to go and say 50 megabytes is good enough. Okay, 50 megabytes, and say if that was the drive, which if you had a 50 megabyte drive, that's something. But that's what I want to do. Okay, create the partition first. Okay, and then you want to write it. And then you would say something like fdisk again, L, and you'd see that you have that new partition available right there. Okay, now I'm going to format this drive, but that's really not the way to do it with DD. You don't really have to format the drive to the same format that you're running over. Okay, and by formatting the drive, you actually lose a little bit of space. So on a 10 gig, you might lose upwards of 300 megabytes or so for the file system format. Okay, so I've had luck with formatting the drive and without formatting the drive, but I found that by not formatting the drive, I can get a little tighter count as far as how much loss I have. Okay, you understand? Because with when you format, it does actually take a few megabytes or this and that. Okay, so for this example, I am going to format so I can put something on it. But you can clone over, alright, without formatting the drive, and you'll see what I'm saying in a second. So I'm going to say make E2FS journal for both dev HDD, and I'm going to say 1. Okay, take no time at all. And every time when you do anything with the partition table, it's always a good time to reboot and everything. And if this was in real life, I would have rebooted my machine already now. Okay, so then I could say blkid or block ID. Okay, and you can see that I have a I have a file system on this drive here. Okay, so let me mount, type ext3. I'm going to mount that HDD1, mount that to mount. Okay, and if I cd into mount, you see here that I have lost and found. Alright, little stub just left over. But I'm going to say touch this is a test. Okay, and also too, when you're working with DD, don't have your drive mounted. Okay, don't have that partition mounted or anything else like that. Alright, and even if you have to go drop down to a live CD, that way the file system's not mounted, do that. You'll get errors with DD saying that you can't clone anyway if it's mounted. So I want to U-mount my drive. Okay, now I want to actually clone over. Or actually, like I said, I have to make a new I'm going to clone this small drive now. I'm going to make a new file, or make a new partition for this. So I'm going to say HDD, let's say HDD, print, I say new, primary, and I'm going to call it 2, yes. Get tight as I can with the block size, and I can copy that block size from the top there. I can say 49,360, and call it, it's actually kilobytes, megabytes, 49, let me go and say 150 megabytes, okay? And it's pretty close. I lost 32 bytes, okay? But that's okay for me. I can deal with that. And I want to say right. So now I'm not going to format this next partition right here. I'm just going to clone it over, okay? And they're small, so it won't take much time at all. And let's say DD, and specify the input file, which would be dev HDD1, okay, and your output, which would be dev HDD2, okay. Now when you hit enter with DD, you'll get no output, nothing like that. You can drop down the PSaux, and there's some other tricks that you can do to get it to actually spit out how far along the process progress is. Alright, but with DD, I like to just DD and walk away from it. It takes a while, and it's powerful enough that if you actually try to interrupt it, intercept it, or anything else like that, you know, if you fool around with your computer a lot, you might screw that up. So you don't want to corrupt any type of, you know, bytes or anything that's going in. Okay, so I made this only 50, so this should not take a while at all. It should be very short. But say if you had, actually I have to go sudo hard on this, if you had a setup like this here, for instance, I just installed LFS 7.3 on this, okay, and I don't want to mess up that install, so I cloned it over immediately, and I threw it over here, and I'm going to go ahead and build some stuff on it, and without messing up my save point, which was the creation of the LFS, okay, and same thing here, okay, this is a 6.8 install, that is, I don't want to mess up, so eventually I'll clone that over to something else, okay, and I have other operating systems up here that I can clone over or do whatever I wanted to. Okay, so this is what you get with DD. You get something like this. After it's all finished and done, you'll see that you got records in, records out, okay, and you should get something like that. Ran out of space is something you may get too, and I hope you don't. That's kind of iffy. There's sometimes that if you're off, say, a block or two, okay, say if you said fdisk L, and if you're off on your block count, this is 360 and this, say, was 328, okay, you may get ran out of hard drive space, okay, and it's questionable whether the integrity of that data is good or not, but something so close, and if it's not really that important, I just like to leave them anyway, okay. But no matter what the case, you definitely want this your target drive to be above your originator, okay, or your host drive, okay. So you may get ran out of room, and it just means that you needed to make your partition a little bit bigger to actually get all the bytes and put them in there. So now if I said something like mount verbose type, let's say ext3, actually I can BL-kit that first for you, okay, that's cloned all over, and I want to say mount verbose ext3 dev HDD2. I want to mount that to mount and look inside of it. I'm conceding into mount and list, and as you can see here, I am not on the other drive, but I did. This is the clone, okay. So that's how DD works. It takes a while, but the whole point of this tutorial is you don't need any third-party software. You don't need, you know, to start up say X or run anything else like that. It's all right here in the bottom. You don't need to jump around and start flipping CDs. You have the capability right here, and it's a good tool. It's a good tool. Like I said, you can clone over CDs, hard drives, data, pictures, whatever you wanted to. Anything that's there that has a block count, you can clone over. Okay, no matter kind of what it is. There's other switches too. You can put the DD. You can say, if for instance I was doing a CD, alright, I would say input file home Douglas. If I had dark room, let me say desktop, and say if there's an ISO in here, like my ISO. Okay, if I wanted to .iso, say if I wanted to clone that over right away, I could then say, dd input file, okay, that's where I wanted it to go, and then I would say output file equals home Douglas desktop new ISO. Okay, and that would just clone it right over. Now there's some other switches you can add to it, like say block size would be 512 or something like that, and then you would say count maybe equals 1, right? But there's a lot of switches you can add to DD, and it's really not that important. It can be important. It can be very, very important, okay, to specify those. But by default, this DD clones over 512, so I'm okay. And the count is just how many passes that you want to run on it, okay? So, look up DD on Google, and definitely it's a powerful thing, okay? So, hope you like this one, guys, and hope it helps you out, and have a great day.